Billionaire CEO fires entire flight crew after being ignored due to his race. Your support absolutely lights up my world. Before we dive into today's heartwarming tale, please hit subscribe. It means everything and helps me share more beautiful stories with our amazing community. Here's my promise. I personally respond to every comment because I genuinely love connecting with you. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I can't wait to meet you and hear your thoughts. Now, let's begin this extraordinary journey together. The cabin's leather seat embraced Marcus like a familiar friend, yet something felt wrong. The scent of warmed bread and roasted chicken drifted through first class, mingling with the soft murmur of satisfied passengers. Around him, silver clinked against porcelain as meals were served with practiced precision. Yet his tray table remained bare, a conspicuous island of emptiness in a sea of culinary abundance. Marcus shifted slightly, his tailored suit catching the afternoon light streaming through the oval window. He wasn't one to make waves over trivial matters, but this felt different. The flight attendant's eyes had swept past him like he was invisible, her smile reserved for everyone else. It wasn't just about hunger. It was about the unmistakable sting of being dismissed. Across the aisle, a businessman in a rumpled shirt attacked his chicken breast with obvious relish. 2 rows ahead, an elderly woman delicately cut into perfectly grilled salmon, the pink flesh flaking under her fork. The symphony of satisfied dining surrounded Marcus like a cruel reminder of his own neglect. His mind drifted to childhood, standing in endless food lines with his mother, her calloused hand gripping his small fingers as they waited for whatever charity could provide. Sometimes they went home empty-handed, their stomachs growling through the night. Those memories had carved themselves deep into his soul, driving him through sleepless nights and impossible odds until he'd built something magnificent from nothing. Yet here he sat, worth more than most small countries' GDP, treated like he didn't belong. Marcus closed his eyes and drew a slow breath through his nose. The meditation techniques he'd learned in his 20s kicked in, steadying his pulse. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing his frustration, but the humiliation burned nonetheless, a familiar fire that reminded him of boardroom battles where he'd had to prove himself twice as hard as anyone else. The flight attendant glided past again, her auburn hair pulled into a perfect chignon, her smile brilliant as she served wine to the couple behind him. When Marcus raised his hand, politely, professionally, she turned away as if he'd become part of the aircraft's furniture. Other passengers began to notice. A woman in pearls shot him a sympathetic glance. For a moment, Marcus considered calling her back, demanding the same treatment as everyone else. His hand twitched toward the call button. But he stopped himself. Confrontation here would only reinforce whatever narrative they'd constructed about him. Instead, he straightened his collar and pulled out his tablet, the screen illuminating his calm features. Documents for tomorrow's merger filled the display, but his mind wandered to something larger. How many others had endured this same quiet humiliation? Passengers without his resources or influence, forced to swallow their dignity because they had no recourse. That thought ignited something deeper than personal anger. It sparked a sense of justice. The hours crawled by. Conversations bubbled around him. Glasses clinked in celebration. Laughter punctuated the recycled air. Marcus sat in his bubble of imposed silence, sipping plain water that had required 2 requests before grudging delivery. His stomach remained empty, but his resolve crystallized with each passing moment. As the plane began its descent toward Los Angeles, the city's golden lights sprawling beneath them like scattered diamonds, Marcus felt an unexpected calm wash over him. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. He opened his laptop and began typing, not with rage, but with surgical precision. Every slight was documented with timestamps. Every deliberate omission was recorded with clinical accuracy. Names were spelled correctly, actions described in the dispassionate language of corporate accountability. His fingers moved across the keyboard like a pianist performing his masterpiece. Each sentence carried the weight of undeniable truth. When he finished, Marcus added one final line that would seal the crew's fate. I expect immediate review and action in accordance with our company's zero-tolerance policies for discrimination. With a single click, The message was sent directly to the airline's board of directors, senior executives, and HR department. Men and women who knew exactly who Marcus Bennett was and what his influence meant to their company's future. The wheels touched down with a gentle thud, engines roaring as they slowed on the tarmac. Passengers stirred eagerly, already reaching for phones and planning their Los Angeles adventures. Marcus remained seated, hands folded, eyes fixed ahead. He had learned long ago that patience was often more devastating than anger. As the cabin emptied, Marcus rose slowly, adjusting his jacket with deliberate care. The lead flight attendant finally met his gaze, perhaps sensing something different in the air. He offered a polite smile that carried no warmth. "Thank you for your service today," he said evenly, his voice calm but loaded with unspoken meaning. Walking down the jet bridge, Marcus felt a steady sense of completion. He didn't need to witness the aftermath personally. He knew how efficiently his company operated, how seriously they took his concerns. By morning, the entire crew's future would be decided. As he entered the terminal, greeted by his driver and the familiar chaos of LAX, Marcus carried himself with the same quiet dignity he'd maintained throughout the flight. To observers, he looked like any other powerful businessman arriving for meetings. But deep down, he knew this flight would be remembered not for its destination, but for the justice it delivered. Because sometimes accountability doesn't roar. Sometimes it lands quietly, like judgment at dawn, steady, controlled, and absolutely impossible to ignore. The silence that followed was so profound it seemed to absorb even the plane's mechanical hums. The remaining crew members stood frozen, their professional masks cracking to reveal pale, stunned faces beneath. The lead attendant's lips parted as if to protest, but only silence emerged. Her earlier confidence, so sharp during the flight, evaporated under the weight of Marcus's revelation. A younger attendant clutched her service tray against her chest like armor, eyes darting between Marcus and her supervisor. Another whispered something, perhaps an apology, perhaps a prayer, but the words dissolved in the thick tension. Marcus extended the document slowly, not with malice but with the finality of judgment. His movements were measured, his composure absolute. The lead attendant reached out with trembling fingers, unfolding the letter to reveal the bold heading, "Termination of employment, effective immediately," stamped with the airline's executive seal. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice fracturing. "We didn't mean." Marcus raised his hand, cutting through her words without anger, but with undeniable authority. "Intent does not erase action," he said. "Every passenger deserves respect. Today, you failed that standard, not just with me, but with the principles this airline was built on. This isn't about a meal or a drink. It's about dignity, and this company will not tolerate discrimination." The words hung in the recycled air like a final verdict. Tears gathered in the young attendant's eyes, but Marcus felt no joy in their distress, only the grim satisfaction of necessary justice. One crew member stepped forward, stammering apologies. "Sir, please, we were under pressure. The flight was—" Marcus's gaze locked on him, steady and unwavering. "Pressure does not excuse prejudice," he replied. "I built this airline to represent excellence, equality, and integrity. If you cannot embody those values, you cannot serve here." Ground staff entered to begin post-flight procedures, stopping short when they sensed the tension crackling through the cabin. Marcus handed the termination notices directly to their supervisor. "Ensure these are processed immediately," he instructed. The man nodded quickly, understanding the gravity of what he was witnessing. For a moment, Marcus stood still, taking in the scene one final time. The same aisle where he'd been ignored and humiliated had become the stage for accountability. His calm presence spoke louder than any outburst could have managed. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps measured and echoing softly against the carpeted floor. Behind him, the crew remained motionless, clutching the letters that had just unraveled their careers. The authority they had wielded so carelessly had crumbled in minutes. As Marcus stepped onto the jet bridge, the airport's familiar hum greeted him. He adjusted his jacket, his expression serene, his conscience clear. To casual observers, he appeared to be just another successful businessman, deplaning after a routine flight. But those who had witnessed the exchange would never forget the quiet lesson he'd delivered. The headlines exploded across every platform within hours. By noon the next day, Marcus's name was trending worldwide. Passengers from the flight began sharing their stories on social media, some describing their discomfort at witnessing his treatment, others admitting they wished they'd spoken up. Hashtags like #RespectInTheAir and Marcus Bennett ignited global conversations about service, discrimination, and accountability. Television anchors dissected every detail. Some praised Marcus's measured response as masterful leadership, how he'd never raised his voice or created a scene, letting his authority speak for itself. Others questioned whether terminating the entire crew was excessive, suggesting individual consequences might have sufficed. Yet even critics acknowledged that his actions had forced the airline industry to confront uncomfortable truths. For Marcus, watching the media storm unfold felt both surreal and inevitable. He hadn't acted for publicity. In fact, he generally avoided the spotlight. But he'd known the moment he sent that email that the consequences would ripple far beyond one flight. In his corner office the following day, as staff briefed him on the growing coverage, Marcus remained calm. "Let them talk," he said. "What matters is the change that follows." And change did follow, swift and comprehensive. Within a week, the airline announced sweeping reforms. Every employee, from senior management to entry-level staff, would undergo mandatory sensitivity and inclusivity training. New policies established clear zero-tolerance stances on discriminatory behavior. Anonymous passenger feedback systems were strengthened, ensuring no complaint could be buried. The board pledged regular audits to maintain accountability, a program Marcus personally oversaw. The industry took notice. Competitor airlines, pressured by public opinion and media scrutiny, began reviewing their own policies. Suddenly, the conversation expanded beyond one CEO or one flight. It encompassed the entire culture of air travel. Were passengers truly being treated equally? Could subtle acts of discrimination be happening daily without consequence? In interviews, Marcus remained measured and thoughtful. Journalists tried to provoke inflammatory sound bites, but he never took the bait. "This wasn't about food," he repeated consistently. "It was about dignity. If I, with all my advantages, can be treated this way, what about those without power or wealth? What about everyday customers who can't fight back? This is about them." Those words resonated globally. Community leaders and activists applauded his stance. Parents shared stories of their children seeing Marcus on the news and learning that respect wasn't negotiable. Even airline employees, initially shaken by the terminations, later admitted the reforms had created healthier, more respectful workplaces. In private moments, Marcus reflected on the irony. He'd boarded that flight simply wanting a quiet meal before an important business meeting. Instead, it had become a catalyst for industry-wide transformation. Life, he mused, had a way of turning personal slights into powerful lessons when handled with patience and wisdom. Weeks later, as the media attention faded, the impact remained. Passengers reported noticeable improvements, warmer interactions, better attentiveness, and above all, fairness. Other airlines adopted similar policies, unwilling to risk the backlash Marcus's company had weathered and overcome. In the end, Marcus Bennett hadn't just demanded respect for himself, he'd elevated standards for millions of travelers worldwide. He'd proven that true leadership wasn't about titles or wealth, but about using influence to protect everyone's dignity. The world would remember this as the story of the CEO who fired an entire flight crew. But Marcus understood the deeper truth. It wasn't about punishment. It was about reminding an industry and society itself of something fundamental yet too often forgotten. Respect is the foundation of every human interaction. Without it, service becomes hollow performance. With it, entire industries can soar. And with that lesson delivered, Marcus Bennett hadn't just transformed one airline. He'd charted a new course for how an entire industry would treat every passenger, one flight at a time.